Stretching across the center of the largest landmass on Earth is an environment engineered to test the limits of human endurance. This map shows the Eurasian Steppe Zone. It is a continuous belt of grassland running 8,000 kilometers from the plains of Eastern Europe all the way to northern China. In an environment this volatile, the material layer touching the skin becomes the first line of defense. Clothing functions as an engineered habitat, regulating the microclimate between the body and the frozen air. But Central Asia is a region of extremes. Travel south, and the freezing grasslands give way to the arid, high-altitude deserts and isolated oasis towns of the Tarim Basin. These contrasting environments produced two distinct approaches to human dress. On the open plains, we find the pastoral nomad. They inhabit what historical texts called the land of felt, wearing heavy, multi-layered garments built to withstand the elements. In the oasis towns, we find the urban elite of the Silk Road. Here, the environment is conquered, and clothing shifts to complex, brightly colored silks. To understand the history of this vast region, we have to decode both systems. We need to examine the utilitarian engineering of steppe survival and the hierarchical economy of the oasis towns. A nomadic lifestyle mandates constant movement. You cannot drag a heavy wooden weaving loom across thousands of miles of grassland. Instead, these populations relied on the resources traveling with them, the wool from their herds. Without looms, you cannot weave interlocking threads, so the nomads developed felting. Felt is a matted aggregate, raw animal hair pressed and locked together through friction and moisture rather than woven into a grid. This illustration documents the process. New wool is laid on a dampened mother felt as a base. The layers are rolled up, wrapped in oxhide, and dragged behind a horse. The constant pounding kneads the fibers into a solid mass. The resulting fabric is incredibly dense. It traps body heat, sheds water, and creates an impenetrable barrier against the freezing steppe winds. This material forms the basis of the primary nomadic garment, the del. It is a unisex, full-length robe designed entirely around the physical mechanics of riding a horse in a harsh climate. Notice how the del is constructed. The front panel overlaps deeply across the chest and fastens at the side. This creates a double layer of insulation over the vital organs and ensures the flap will not blow open when riding directly into a headwind. Because the del fits tightly to trap heat, there are no pockets. Every daily necessity, from knives to fire starters, is mounted directly to a sturdy leather belt. The engineering extends down to their footwear. Nomadic boots often featured tiny, overlapping pieces of metal inserted directly between the outer leather surface and the inner lining. This hidden armor prevented the boots from collapsing, providing a rigid base to stand up in the stirrups while riding at high speeds, while simultaneously protecting the foot during combat. Steppe clothing operates as a closed-loop technology. Every design choice, from the matted wool to the reinforced boots, is a calculated response to the realities of the herd and the horizon. Survival on the open plains depended on navigating more than just the physical terrain. The nomadic world was populated by invisible forces that had to be managed with the same precision as a winter storm.
For millennia, the shaman acted as the intermediary between the human and spirit worlds. The shaman's costume was not worn for decoration. It was a highly specific piece of wearable spiritual engineering. Look at the metal objects sewn onto this tunic. These long iron bars represent human bones, turning the exterior into an exposed skeleton. The metal rings represent the joints. The long silken streamers act as familiars, spirit companions designed to help the shaman successfully reach the other world. When Tibetan Buddhism entered Mongolia in the late 16th century, it absorbed rather than erased these ancient shamanic aesthetics. You can see this merger in the Tsam masked dances. Monks performed these rituals to exorcise evil spirits, wearing elaborate papier-mâché masks that clearly echo the fierce, skeletal motifs of the older shamanic tradition. For the nomad, spiritual clothing acted as a wearable interface with the spirit world. This map shows the Tarim Basin. Here, sedentary oasis towns dot the edges of the Taklamakan Desert, creating a drastically different environment. Protected from the open steppe and enriched by Silk Road trade, These urban centers did not need clothing optimized for survival. They needed clothing optimized to display of economic power. As wealth concentrated within these walls, the visible display of capital became a social necessity. To manage this growing complexity, a specific Turkestan dress code emerged, a legal and social framework where fabric choice signaled your exact position in the urban hierarchy. The sovereign and his court claimed exclusive rights to heavy silk velvets, while lower ranks were relegated to specific cottons or imported wools. For wealthy merchants and scholars, the ultimate symbol of urban status was silk ikat, known locally as ab brandi. Ikat requires immense labor. The pattern is not woven directly into the fabric. Instead, the individual silk warp threads are tightly bound and tie-dyed in multiple baths before they ever reach the loom. Once dyed, these threads must be perfectly aligned on a manual loom. Because the dye naturally bleeds slightly during the process, the finished fabric features a distinctive blurred cloud-like edge. This process requires stationary equipment, specialized labor, and imported materials. In the Oasis, clothing's primary engineering goal was the maintenance of strict social distance. Look at these two structures side by side. On the left, the matted felt of the steppe. On the right, the interlocking grid of the silk ikat. The land of felt utilized a system optimized entirely for durability, insulation, and nomadic mobility. The Silk Road utilized a system optimized for trade, rigid social stratification, and consolidating urban wealth. Neither is primitive. Both are highly sophisticated engineering responses to their exact environmental and economic constraints. As empires rose and fell across Eurasia, the transition from loomless felt to complex ikat tracked exactly with populations moving from nomadic conquest to a settled administration. The textiles of Central Asia serve as the physical records of our adaptation. They document the exact mechanics of human endurance against the elements and the elaborate systems we build to define our place among one another.